For most people, love is supposed to bring closeness, comfort, and understanding. Welcome to emotional shadow. But what if the very feeling of distance you fear is not a sign that the relationship is dying, but a hidden mechanism that shapes every deep connection? What if emotional distance isn't just a problem, but a signal, a strategy, and sometimes even a silent form of protection? This is the part of love no one teaches. The part that continues to destroy strong relationships because people misread the meaning behind the gaps, the pauses, the coldness, and the unexplained silence. Emotional distance doesn't appear out of nowhere. It has roots, patterns, and a psychological logic that makes it far more complicated than simply losing feelings. And if you've ever wondered how two people who once felt inseparable can suddenly feel worlds apart, the answer begins much earlier than you think. To understand the paradox of emotional distance in love, it helps to look back at the historical and psychological foundations of human connection. Early relationship theorists like John Bowlby explored how attachment shapes every bond we form in adulthood, revealing that the way we respond to distance comes from the emotional blueprint formed in childhood. Later, researchers like Sue Johnson introduced the idea that romantic connection is a dance of emotional safety and threat, where distance often emerges when one partner senses danger, even if the threat is invisible to the other. And perhaps the most surprising twist is the realization that emotional distance can sometimes rise in relationships, not because love is fading, but because love is overwhelming. When closeness becomes too intense, when vulnerability becomes too exposed, the mind can pull away as a defensive instinct. This sets the stage for one of the most misunderstood dynamics in modern relationships: loving someone deeply while simultaneously feeling the urge to protect yourself from them. The origins of emotional distance can often be traced to early relational experiences. People learn from childhood whether closeness is safe, dangerous, unpredictable, or conditional. These early lessons shape how adults react under stress, conflict, or emotional demand. When a child grows up with inconsistent or emotionally absent caregivers, they learn to guard their feelings, to self-soothe, and to avoid depending on others. When they grow up and enter relationships, that old instinct awakens. The more emotionally significant a partner becomes, the more their nervous system reacts to potential loss or disappointment. The brain pulls away not because it wants to disconnect, but because it wants to survive. This is how emotional distance begins, not with the intention to hurt, but with the subconscious need to feel safe. As relationships progress, this distance often increases in a predictable pattern. In the early stages of infatuation, closeness feels natural and effortless. But as real intimacy grows, so does the vulnerability. One partner often moves closer, seeking deeper emotional connection, while the other begins to step back, sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly. This shift doesn't usually start with major conflicts. It begins with subtle changes: less eye contact, shorter conversations, slower replies, or sudden irritability. Over time, these small moments accumulate, creating a rising emotional gap. The partner seeking closeness senses something is off and tries harder to reconnect, while the partner who feels overwhelmed retreats even further. This cycle, known in psychology as the pursuer-distancer dynamic, becomes one of the most common emotional patterns in romantic relationships. The breaking point usually appears when both partners begin misinterpreting each other's actions. The partner who feels the distance begins to assume rejection, neglect, or loss of interest. The partner creating the distance assumes they are protecting the relationship by preventing conflict or emotional overload. But the more one seeks closeness, the more the other withdraws. The more one withdraws, the more the other panics. This cycle eventually leads to emotional exhaustion, conflict, or complete shutdown. Arguments become less about the actual issue and more about the unspoken emotional need underneath. The need to feel seen, valued, chosen, and emotionally secure. When these needs remain unmet, the relationship reaches a point where even small misunderstandings feel like major betrayals. The consequences of sustained emotional distance can be devastating for emotional intimacy. Conversations turn shallow. Vulnerability becomes rare. Touch becomes inconsistent. The relationship begins to feel functional rather than emotional. Both partners start living in the same physical space but in completely different emotional worlds. One partner feels lonely, while the other feels pressured. Resentment grows quietly, and emotional numbness often follows. Many couples attempt to fix the problem with surface-level solutions, more time together. Temporary closeness after fights, promises to communicate better but, without understanding the root cause, these solutions fade quickly. Emotional distance doesn't disappear through forced closeness. It changes only when partners understand the emotional meaning behind the distance. In modern relationships, emotional distance has become even more common due to shifting communication habits, social media dynamics, and increasing psychological pressure. Studies show that people today receive more emotional input from digital interactions than from face-to-face connection, creating a constant comparison between real relationships and idealized online expectations. Manipulative patterns such as intermittent reinforcement where affection is given also becoming more common. This makes emotional distance even more painful because the partner cannot predict when closeness will return. Communication breakdowns repeat over time as couples rely more on short messages, emojis, and assumptions rather than deep, emotional conversations. The irony is that technology has made communication easier but emotional understanding harder. The more people stay connected online, the more disconnected their real relationships can become. 3 key takeaways emerge from this complex paradox of emotional distance. First, distance is often a protective response, not a rejection. When someone pulls away, it may reflect their fear of losing the relationship, not their desire to end it. Understanding this changes the emotional meaning of distance from something threatening to something revealing. Second, emotional distance becomes toxic only when it is misunderstood or ignored. The moment partners begin talking about what the distance represents, fear, overwhelm, unmet needs, the relationship moves toward healing instead of collapse. And third, intimacy requires emotional regulation, not just emotional expression. Without the ability to stay grounded during moments of vulnerability, closeness becomes overwhelming and distance becomes inevitable. Ultimately, the fragility of trust and love lies in how easily emotional misunderstandings can reshape an entire relationship. The gap between two people may start with silence, discomfort, or temporary withdrawal, but if left unexplored, it becomes a canyon. Emotional distance, when misunderstood, becomes a slow, quiet destruction. But when recognized and addressed, it becomes a doorway to deeper understanding, safety, and connection. If this exploration of emotional dynamics opened new perspectives for you, consider subscribing and engaging with the channel. Every video here is designed to help you understand yourself, your partner, and the hidden forces that shape love. Your support helps bring more insights to people who need them most. So stay connected, stay curious, and keep learning the language of the heart.